You want to grab the attention of your players at the start of every single one of your sessions and really bring back that energy you left off with from last time. But you're getting frustrated because it never seems to happen. You see, last session was so much fun. There was an amazingly epic battle and a heartfelt moment as a long-time loved NPC finally made their way back to the players after a literal year. But it's been 2 weeks since then, and you know exactly what's going to happen after you utter the famous words, "What do you do next?" It's going to take about 15 to 20 minutes at least for any of that energy to start getting rekindled in the souls of your players. And you're pretty sure that about halfway through the episode, because it happens really often, they're going to forget a really critical clue that you gave them last session or maybe a couple sessions ago, and they'll spin their wheels for up to half an hour. It's just a slog you go through every single time. But if you can get through it like you always do, you'll have such an amazing time. It's why you keep coming back. But imagine if you never had to go through that slog and instead got to play D&D for an extra 30 minutes every single session. If I still have your attention and you feel even a modicum of that applies to you, then let me summarize the rest of the video right now. The recap you give at the start of a session that kicks things off is how you solve that slog. It's as important as the monsters, the encounters, the clues. A recap is the first moment we get to start playing the game. It's what's responsible for taking all of this chaotic energy at your table, focusing it, and setting your players up for fun and success. But I guarantee that only a handful of you have ever taken 5 minutes to prepare what you're going to say during your recap. What were some of the most powerful things that happened last session that, if briefly mentioned, memories would come flooding back, bringing your players right back into that same energy from last time? What do your players need to know that you, the GM, know will be important? Any clues? Plots going on? I don't really want to rely on a hastily written note that someone made right before they ran out to the car at the end of last session because it ran late. And is there a fun way to kickstart it? A question you pose to them to start things off? Something at least a little bit better than, insert party name here, what do you do next? A little too open-ended, isn't it? Is that what you would have asked if last session kept going and simply didn't end? So if you need to jump ship right now, this is the only thing you need to know. Take 5 minutes and prepare your recaps. Jot down a couple notes of what you're going to mention that'll bring back the energy from last session. Tell your players what they ought to know because you already told them, so why not remind them? And start off with something a little bit better than what do you do next? Because it's honestly a shame that recaps are called recaps, because they're more of your launch pad than anything else. Now, if you want a little something more, I do have a small process I use to help me prep my recaps in under 5 minutes, because it wouldn't be a modular DM if I didn't. The process I use is called ARC. A-R-C. There are 3 bullet lists I make when preparing a recap. So let's run through them. The first list is A for Afterimage. Think of what the most impactful moments were during your last session. The moments that if you briefly mention them won't simply remind players what happened, but will help them recapture the moods and the feelings they felt before they went home. For example, if I were to write something like this down for my previous session, I might mention that Stella has this big magical tome, a codex, that cast a spell by itself. She had no part in it, and it created a bridge that went from the ground all the way up to the top of her roof so that she could help her friends in battle. There was a really funny goblin negotiation, and probably also that one of my players found a 150-foot chasm. She jumped all the way down, survived, but then her dad followed after her, and almost died. He failed his acrobatics checks pretty spectacularly. Those are the types of key moments that I would want to mention, because I know if I say them, some of the players are going to start remembering, oh my gosh, that was so cool. Dude, do you remember doing that? Oh my gosh, she did such a cool job. And they will start remembering all the moods and all the feelings they had before they had to go home. Because you don't want to get bogged down in the details. The more you do, the more you compete with the imagination that's going on in your players' heads. Because I guarantee the epicness, how sad, how emotional, how wondrous a moment was, is always going to be more impactful in their imagination than anything you could say out of your mouth. So just hop on that imagination, mention some key highlights, and you will start to recapture that mood instantly. The next list is R for remind. This is where you jot down pieces of information that you believe would be helpful for your players to keep top of mind. Was there a really big clue you gave last session? Perhaps there's an NPC they wanted to go meet and talk with, but they haven't yet. Is there an event creeping closer that they need to be aware of? Or maybe they should get a reminder of why they're here doing this because it's been so long. Even if you have the best note takers in the world in your group, you as the GM still know far better than all the players for what would be most helpful for them to keep top of mind out of the pages and pages of notes they have. Plus, you'll really be helping them get into character because surely their characters know all of this stuff and are already thinking about these things. Because it hasn't been weeks or months for them, it's been days, hours, or maybe even just a few seconds. And if you're worried that, oh man, I'm mentioning the same things over and over again, you're in good company. For example, Matthew Mercer himself, if you've ever paid attention to how he does some of his recaps, there have been instances where he mentions the exact same thing over and over and over and over and over again for up to 10 to 12 episodes straight. So don't worry about it. If there's something the characters need to be cognizant of, mention it. So for some examples of things that I might jot down here in this list, I would probably put things like the Festival of Eternal Day is occurring in a few weeks back in the city, so they probably need to get back in time for that. They found several magical items like a curious wand and a box that makes infinite sandwiches. They discovered an ancient city's ruins about 150 deep underneath the city they go to that was sliced by a sword. And a few sessions ago, they commissioned a couple spies to go into enemy territory. And it's about time for those spies to come back to the city and report what they found. Notice that I'm not picking things that only happened last session. I'm picking things out of all of the sessions that have occurred so far. What are all of the things, all of the clues, everything that would be helpful for my players to keep top of mind? Now, no, I'm not going to put 15 things in this list. I'll probably pick the top 5 or 6, but you get the point. Don't limit yourself just to what happened last session. Take everything that the characters need to know so that you can set them up for success and ultimately the most amount of fun. Lastly, we have C for Catapult, the purpose of which is to help you launch players to literally catapult them into action to avoid the typical, so insert party name here, what do you guys do next? Because even perfectly equipped with all the information we have now given players, there are still a million things they could do. And you usually end up waiting for that one player to finally speak up and say something like, well, we could, I guess, go into the chasm. They already jumped down, so I guess why not? It's far better to take a few moments and think about a specific question or a challenge you would pose to a particular player just to get things started and build some momentum. Something a lot more like what you would ask them if last session hadn't ended. So a couple things I jot some notes about here would be I have a player, Zarin, who just saw his companions jump down into that chasm. So maybe I should reach out to him and say, hey, you haven't heard anything happening down there for a few moments. Are you getting worried or are you thinking about jumping down there? Another perspective might be, hey, I've got 2 players that are in the chasm. I could mention that there are a bunch of gleaming eyes that they see off in the distance and ask them, what are you going to do right now as you see potentially a monster coming in your direction? Nice, short, simple, sweet, very actionable, not too difficult to come up with, and it's a heck of a lot better than asking the entire party, what do you do next? Now we've got A, R, and C all taken care of, we know exactly what we want to mention during our recap. It's just a matter of mixing and matching all of them together to turn into something that looks a little bit more like a story. Maybe something like this. Last we left off, Song of Swords and Shadowed Stars. You had made your way to an old goblin encampment you had found a while back, helping the city prepare for the Festival of Eternal Day that will be happening in 2 days' time. The battle with the goblins went beyond well, as Stella in the middle of it, as you were trying to get up to the top of that roof to help out, your book, that codex you've been carrying around, came to life and cast a spell that you've never seen or heard of before, giving you literally a bridge all the way up to the top of that roof so that you could help your friends. Raul, you started a amazing negotiation with these goblins, convincing them that you were not there to harm them, despite Zarin literally killing someone in the kitchen. You caught them completely unawares and gave all of your companions the opportunity to sneak up behind them, killing all of the goblins without any of your players, any of your companions getting injured. Knowing that you need to get all the way back, taking all of your loot with you, the various magical items you found, like the really interesting wand that shot off missiles, and this little pouch that seems to make an infinite amount of sandwiches. You knew you had to get back to the city because you had commissioned some spies to come back in about another day's time and give you a report on what they found in the middle of the enemy city that you're making plans to go to. However, before you were able to, Lilith, you let your adventuristic capabilities and your instincts get the better of you because you had seen a 150-foot chasm laying out ahead of you in the middle of these farm fields, and you just dove straight in, making amazing acrobatics checks, taking no damage as you come to the bottom. But however, your father was not so lucky, diving all the way down, almost dying. But as you both turned around, your dark vision starting to take effect down here, you found an amazing city, ancient in shape and size, but seemingly cut in half by a impossibly large sword. But as that's where we left off, Zarin, you just saw 2 of your friends dive into this chasm. You heard the splats and sounds of Raul having taken a massive amount of damage on his way down, but as he disappeared out of sight, it has been complete silence for a few moments. What do you do? And that's it for this session today, everyone. That's the format I use to prep my recaps. It's a great way if you're someone like me that has way too many wild ideas running through their head to be able to focus on the recap and prep it in a very short amount of time. But even if you don't follow the framework, you don't like it, or maybe you have better ideas of your own, the key takeaway is this. Take 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, to prep your recaps. They deserve it. Jot down some notes about what would be really helpful to mention to your players that they should know ahead of time. Bring back some of the energy you had last session before Joe had to go run to his car because the previous session went late. And here is to avoiding that 30-minute slog at the beginning of our sessions so that we can spend as much time as possible playing D&D and building amazing stories with our friends. See you next time.